Hey, Boss Economics fam. Buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the economic dumpster fire that is 2025. The headlines are screaming, the numbers are tanking, and guess who's to blame? Yep, you guessed it, our fearless leaders in Washington, D.C., and their brilliant management of the economy. From tariff tantrums to GDP meltdowns, we've got a front row seat to the clown show, and trust me, it's not pretty. So, grab your popcorn, folks. Whether you're a finance bro sweating over your portfolio or just a regular Joe worried about paying rent, this one's for you. Let's break down the chaos, expose the idiocy, and maybe, just maybe, learn how to survive this mess. Let's start with the big, fat, ugly number staring us in the face. The US economy, the so-called largest in the world, is growing at a pathetic annualized rate of 0.4% in Q1 2025. That's right, folks, 0.4%. To put that into perspective, it's the weakest growth in nearly 3 years, and it's basically the economy telling us, I'm tired, I'm broke, and I'm done with this nonsense. Now, if you're new to Boss Economics world, let me break this down for you in plain English. GDP, or Gross Domestic Product, is the total value of goods and services produced in a country. When it grows, it means businesses are humming, people are spending, and life is good. When it stalls out at 0.4%, it means we're one bad decision away from a recession, and trust me, our government is full of bad decisions. But here's the kicker, this isn't some random act of economic nature. Oh no, this is a man-made disaster, courtesy of, you guessed it, government mismanagement. And who's the ringmaster of this circus? None other than President Donald Trump, back in the White House and swinging his tariff hammer like a kid with a piñata. Let's talk tariffs, folks, because this is where the government's genius really shines. Trump's big idea to make America great again is slapping massive tariffs on imports, supposedly to protect American businesses. Sounds good on paper, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Here's the reality, tariffs are like throwing a Molotov cocktail into the global economy and hoping it only burns down your neighbor's house. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. According to Bloomberg Economics, Trump's tariffs could slash China's direct U.S. exports by over 80% in the medium term, putting as much as 2.3% of China's GDP at risk. But here's the part they don't tell you on cable news, this doesn't just hurt China, it boomerangs right back to the US. How? Well, for starters, tariffs make imports more expensive. So, American businesses that rely on imported goods, like, say, raw materials or parts for manufacturing, get hit with higher costs. What do? They either eat the losses, spoiler, they won't, or pass those costs on to you, the consumer. That's right, folks, your grocery bill, your car payment, your new iPhone. All going up, up, up. And don't take my word for it, look at the data. The U.S. trade deficit ballooned in Q1 2025, hitting a record $1.2 trillion annualized, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Why? Because companies, knowing Trump's tariffs were coming, scrambled to import as much as possible before the levies kicked in on April 2, 2025. This front-loading of imports artificially boosted the trade deficit, but here's the kicker, it's not sustainable. Once the tariffs fully hit, imports will tank, exports will suffer, and the economy will take another nosedive. But wait, there's more. Trump's latest brainstorm is to use tariff revenue to replace income taxes for people making under $200,000 a year. Sounds great, right? Free money. Except, not really. Economists across the board, from the left-leaning Center on Budget and Policy Priorities to the right-leaning Tax Foundation, have called this idea pure fantasy. The math just doesn't add up. In 2024, U.S. income tax revenue was $2.2 trillion, while tariff revenue, even with Trump's hikes, is projected to hit just $200 billion in 2025. You don't need a PhD in economics to see the problem here, $200 billion doesn't cover $2.2 trillion. It's like trying to fill a swimming pool with a garden hose. So, what's the real story? This is just political theater, folks. Trump's dangling tax cuts in front of voters like a carrot on a stick, all while his tariffs choke the economy and drive up prices. And who pays the price? You, me, and every hardworking American trying to make ends meet. Thanks, government. Now, let's zoom out from the tariff train wreck and look at the bigger picture. Why is GDP growth so pathetic? 2 words, consumer fatigue. After years of inflation eating away at their wallets, 7.8% peak CPI in 2022, courtesy of the Fed's late response to post-COVID spending, American consumers are tapped out. Real wages, adjusted for inflation, have barely budged since 2021, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Meanwhile, household debt hit a record $17.8 trillion in Q4 2024, per the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Credit card balances alone are up 48% since 2021. Translation: people are broke, folks. They're maxing out their credit cards just to pay for groceries, and now, with Trump's tariffs jacking up prices even more, they're pulling back on spending. The latest Bloomberg survey of economists predicts consumer spending will grow by just 0.8% in Q1 2025, down from 2.2% in Q4 2024. That's a huge drop, and it's dragging the entire economy down with it. But it's not just consumers, businesses are freaking out, too. The GDP report is expected to show a tiny bright spot in business investment, mainly in commercial aircraft. But don't get too excited, companies are already slamming on the brakes. Why? Because they have no idea what's coming next. With Trump's trade policies flip-flopping faster than a fish on a dock, businesses are too scared to invest in new factories, hire workers, or expand. The National Federation of Independent Business reported in April 2025 that small business optimism hit its lowest level since 2012, with 60% of owners citing economic uncertainty as their top concern. And here's the kicker, this isn't just a US problem. Canada, our friendly neighbor to the north, is also feeling the heat. With Trump threatening tariffs on Canadian goods, business and consumer confidence in Canada has tanked. The Bank of Canada is projecting just 1.8% annualized GDP growth in Q1 2025, and that's assuming things don't get worse. Spoiler alert, they will. Now, let's talk jobs, because this is where the government loves to pat itself on the back. The April 25, 2025, employment report is expected to show a 130,000 increase in payrolls, decent, but way down from the 230,000 jobs added in March. The unemployment rate is holding steady at 4.2%, which sounds okay, right? Wrong. This is the calm before the storm, folks. When GDP growth slows to 0.4%, businesses don't keep hiring, they start firing. And with consumer spending drying up, it's only a matter of time before layoffs hit. Just look at the tech sector, Amazon, Google, and Tesla have already announced combined layoffs of over 50,000 workers in Q1 2025, citing economic uncertainty. And that's just the beginning. But here's the real scandal, the government's job numbers are a mirage. The Bureau of Labor Statistics loves to tout job growth, but dig into the data, and you'll see most of these new jobs are part-time or gig work. Full-time employment as a share of total jobs has dropped from 83% in 2019 to 79% in 2024, according to the BLS. Meanwhile, the labor force participation rate, the share of people actually working or looking for work, is stuck at 62.7%, the lowest in decades. Translation: the government's strong labor market is a house of cards, propped up by low-wage, insecure jobs. And when the recession hits, and trust me, it's coming, those jobs will be the first to go. Now, let's turn our attention to the Federal Reserve, the supposed guardian of the economy. With GDP growth tanking and consumers pulling back, you'd think the Fed would be cutting interest rates to stimulate the economy, right? Wrong. Economists expect the Fed to hold rates steady at its May 2025 meeting, even as inflation cools to 2.6%, the lowest since June 2024, per the PCE price index. Why? Because the Fed is terrified of being blamed for the next recession. After getting roasted for keeping rates too low for too long in the early 2020s, 7.8% inflation in 2022, the Fed is now overcorrecting, keeping rates too high for too long. The federal funds rate is still at 5.25% to 5.5%, a level that's crushing borrowers, from small businesses to homebuyers. Mortgage rates are hovering near 7%, pricing millions of Americans out of the housing market, according to the National Association of Realtors. But here's the real crime, the Fed's inaction is making Trump's tariff disaster even worse. High interest rates make the dollar stronger, which makes U.S. exports more expensive and imports cheaper. That's the exact opposite of what Trump says his tariffs are supposed to do. So, while Trump's busy starting trade wars, the Fed is sitting on its hands, letting the economy spiral into a ditch. Thanks, government. And let's not forget the rest of the world, because Trump's tariff tantrums are sending shockwaves far beyond U.S. borders. In Europe, the European Central Bank is patting itself on the back for getting inflation down to 2.1% in April 2025, but GDP growth is anemic, just 0.2% in Q1. Germany, the Eurozone's economic powerhouse, is teetering on the edge of recession, with factory output down 3.2% year-over-year, per Eurostat. In Asia, China's economy is getting hammered by Trump's tariffs, with industrial profits rebounding in March 2025 but manufacturing PMIs expected to sag in April. Japan's central bank is stuck in limbo, holding rates steady as it waits to see how bad the tariff fallout will be. And in Canada, the ongoing trade war with the U.S. is dominating the 2025 election, with both Mark Carney's Liberals and Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives promising deficit spending to prop up the economy. The bottom line: the U.S. government's reckless policies aren't just tanking our economy, they're dragging the whole world down with us. So, what's the takeaway, folks? The US economy is on life support, and the government is the one pulling the plug. Trump's tariffs are a disaster, the Fed is asleep at the wheel, and consumers and businesses are paying the price. GDP growth is pathetic, jobs are a mirage, and the global economy is a mess, all because our leaders care more about political stunts than sound policy. Here at Boss Economics World, we don't sugarcoat the truth. The government's mismanagement is driving us straight into a recession, and unless something changes fast, 2025 is going to be a very rough year. So, what can you do? Stay informed, protect your finances, and don't fall for the government's empty promises. Until next time, this is Boss Economics World, calling out the clowns and fighting for the little guy. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let us know in the comments, are tariffs the dumbest economic policy ever, or is there something even worse? See you in the next video.